Hey everybody, it's Mandy. Ooh, today we are going to talk about my journey from being born into a born-again Christian conservative household, and how I am now this woo-woo YouTube person, a tarot reader and psychic. How did that all happen? That is a question that I always found fascinating. Whenever I meet somebody, I'm like, oh, are you like a fourth generation witch? You're like, oh, do your parents hate you because you do this? Like, I'm so intrigued by people's stories that I wanted to share, but also, you know, nobody is going to give you permission to be who you are at your core. Only you know who you are. And if I can be that for somebody today, I really, really, really want to be that for somebody today. So the reason I'm so like about it is because it's going to be very long-winded. It's going to be full of giant overshares. And I'm probably going to ramble through the whole thing. I'm not going to edit this video down, so there's probably going to be lots of ums. I just don't have the time. And so just pretend like we're, you know, at the cafe, and you just asked me this question, like, oh, Mandy, I'd love to know your spiritual journey. Oh, great. How much time you got? For me, everything is like affects everything. So if someone's like, hey, how you doing today, Mandy? I'm like, well, 5 years ago, it really started, you know, like, I don't know how to, I don't know. So this is I'm probably going to share more than I have to, but it's just how my brain works. I'm sorry. Town Bone sleeping over here. I don't know if you can see him. There he is. He's so cute. Okay. All right, we're going to do it. We're doing it. We're doing it right now. Okay. So I was born into a conservative Christian born-again family. And when I came out of the womb, it was pretty much with a plate of cookies asking for people to love me. My two older sisters at the time were kind of railing against my parents, and not because they were bad kids. My parents were saved later in life, born again religion. You know, you get saved and you go to heaven or hell, and or after you get saved, you don't, you know, now you get to go to heaven. And a lot of people that get saved kind of go off the deep end in regard to like cutting things out of their life, like no more movies, that's evil, no more music, that's evil, no more. And my parents kind of did that at the start of their Christian journey, and it affected my sisters because all of a sudden they couldn't go to movies, they couldn't go to school dances, and they railed against it. And they weren't, you know, like doing coke, you know, they weren't bad kids, but it caused a lot of fights. And so when I came out, it was like I was the golden child, because as a Libra, I want fairness and balance. I hate fights. I hate confrontation. I just want everyone to be okay. And so I was kind of the weird one that would like entertain the family, like to try and like bring humor and, you know, happiness. But also, mostly I just really stayed in my lane because I did not want to disappoint my parents. And I had a little brother too, and he, you know, anytime the house would kind of turn chaotic, I would grab him, and it was a lot of fun. So that's kind of what I was born into, people pleasing, not really knowing anything about myself, just kind of staying in my lane, like, sure, yes, you know, everything. And I was very, very sincere in my faith. Like, I always, from a young age, was highly sensitive, but I felt God's presence in my life. Like, that was not a false thing. And it meant something to me, my relationship with God. So I go through high school. I'm very alone. My friends live 2.5 hours away in a youth group away from me. So my high school experience, like, I was never invited to a party except for like the field hockey party when we lost states. So dramatic. And so I just felt like very alone. My best friend moved, and all the guys I liked lived 2.5 hours away. So relationships never happened. And then I went to college, and all that I wanted out of college was my MRS degree. I wanted to marry a youth pastor, and I wanted to have 4 kids. Like, that is what I wanted. And having gone from high school where, you know, it was very secular, and, you know, I had to be an example for Christ, I was like, okay, I'm at a Christian college. I'm going to be able to like have fun and like meet people and do all these things and meet boys, and I'm totally going to get married, and this is like the answer. Well, that never happened. In hindsight, I had no self-worth growing up. I feel like that came from Christianity. I was a very sensitive kid, and you're constantly being told you're going to go to hell, or God's disappointed, or like, what kind of sin do you need to release now? And it's all like guilt and shame. And I remember, doing a missions trip in Brooklyn for like to do homeless stuff. And we were kind of walking around town, and we came across the Brooklyn Tabernacle, like good old Brooklyn Tabernacle Church, and we were in there, huge black church, giant church, and everybody's singing and dancing, they're having a good time, and it's so freaking joyful. And I was like, okay, I know all these people can't possibly be like, super straight laced, So I'm like, where's the guilt? Where's the shame? Like, I'm not seeing it. But that was just my experience with Christianity. It's like every sermon was just like very, let's pray for God to forgive us. Like it's just like the flogging or flailing or the, like whatever. And as a kid that just wanted God to love her and just wanted to be good, I was like freaking best like kid you could ever want. And, for having lustful thoughts, like I ripped myself to shreds. Like, God, so messed up. So I go to college, and I can't like talk to a guy without my face turning bright red. I can't, I don't know how to communicate with anybody, because for me, I feel like, again, this is all my personal experience. I have wonderful Christian friends that I still adore to this day. But for me, it was about, getting texts. For me, it created a lot of boundaries. And I didn't know how to let people in. I didn't know how to have conversations. I didn't know, with like my girlfriends or whatever. But in regard to like romantic feelings or whatever, I was very lonely. So I watched way too many romantic comedies, and I just expected that I was going to sit in a corner reading really beautifully one day, and a guy would come by and be like, wow, she's really smart. And then I'd trip over something, and then we'd, fall madly in love, and that's, how it would be. So that never happened. Surprise! Can you imagine? I was so cute back then too. So I'm in college. It doesn't happen. And I got a communications degree, which is like dumb. And so I've got like nothing to show. No kids, no husband. Everybody's doing these exciting things. And I'm working in a phone company after college, living with my mom. And I'm like, okay, I can't live with my mom forever. And like, I need something. So I was like, since, I didn't get married, like I might as well go on an adventure. I might as well do something. And I knew that Groundlings was out in LA. And I'd always wanted to be an actress ever since I was little. And so I just decided, like my sisters lived in Los Angeles at the time. And so that seemed like the obvious choice, like as opposed to New York. I'm originally from upstate New York. And so I think I'm 22 and I fly out to Los Angeles. And while that was a big change for me, kind of unexpected for a lot of people, it wasn't like a big choice in regard to my own personal power. Like we'll get there. But so I make this big decision and move out to Los Angeles. I start taking classes wherever I can, and I have the time of my life. I started a lot of comedy theaters, and I just made like amazing friends. We all kind of grew up together. And as I'm, transitioning into this new big city, I'm meeting new people, and I'm seeing new experiences, and I'm seeing people of color, and I'm working with undocumented immigrants, and I'm, it opened me up to a lot of life experiences. And throughout my whole Christian journey, I've always questioned, like my love for God was always super, super, super sincere, but I never understood the idea of like, how could, a Buddhist monk be going to hell because he's not a born again Christian when he's like meditating and fasting and like doing all these things to connect with God, and I'm over here like having lustful thoughts, like unworthy, go to hell. And like, how is that equal? How is that okay? Like, what loving God would do that? So I kind of like have always had these thoughts, and I've never been afraid to ask those questions. And I noticed that, as long as you always go back to God, questioning your faith, everyone tells you, question your faith, ask God these questions, until you want to walk away from your faith. But I wasn't there yet. So get to Los Angeles, and my very first family is at the gay bar. My sister is an incredible singer, and so we would go to the gay bar and sing karaoke every Sunday night, and oh my God, those were some of the best times of my life. We just had so much fun. I love karaoke, that we just always danced, and we became this family, and that was my first family out in Los Angeles. And then I met all my acting comedy friends, and I was just like, gay people are going to hell because they I just listened to stories, and you're just like born that way. Like I began seeing things differently because I began to realize that life is not black and white, that humanity is messy and gray, and it is delicious and messy and exuberant and passionate, and none of it is black and white. Our laws are all black and white, and it's like, I don't have the answers there, but I began to like open up to different perspectives. In the meantime, everybody that I've ever liked in my entire life has never liked me back. And that just crushed my self-worth, plus, Christianity. So it was just like, I'm worthless. I was a good little comedian back in the day, but yeah, in regard to like relationships, also LA is not the place really to meet guys. Men can date, 60-year-old men can date like 18-year-old girls, and it's like totally normal. So it is not an easy city to meet people, but I also know my self-worth. I wasn't projecting come hither vibes, and I was still a virgin. So and still, waiting for the one, because that's the rule in Christianity, is that you wait until you're married. So I was clinging to that like a bat out of hell. Oh, we're gonna get into all this. It's so much fun. Okay, so I'm in LA. I'm taking classes. It's super fun. I'm not getting anywhere. I guess cut to the end of my time in LA, about 8 years later, it just kind of all started falling apart. Like, I was in $36,000 worth of credit card debt. I am not a lazy actor, or in general. If I have a dream, like, I go for it. I will take the classes. I will invest $10,000. I don't care. I will do whatever. I will, blah, blah, blah. Like, whatever anything. Like, I was taking classes 3 nights a week, performing 3 nights a week, and then the last night I would go to karaoke on Sunday nights. I was always doing something, but a lot of that debt came from, $800 headshots. And back in the day, you didn't just like click, click, click and submit. It was like you had to get actual photos printed, and then you had to send those photos through the mail. It was like a whole thing. Oh, you little fuckers that have it so easy now. But I was just tired. I was in so much debt, and I was having to work 2 jobs to get myself out of it. And so I was basically working 6 days a week, and then on that 7th day, I would just eat and hate my life, and like my body started breaking down. Everything started hurting. I became really hopeless, and all of the fun stuff that my friends and I used to do, like, we just weren't creating that stuff as much anymore. Well, I guess I always was, but no, I guess we all were. It just had a different feel. It was kind of like, oh, we're all resigned to just kind of living here, and nobody had made it, And I was really hoping to like just book that tampon commercial or whatever, just so that I could have all that debt pay off. Because that was the thing. It was like, I don't care about getting into debt because I just need the one thing. I just need the one thing. And God's going to bless me because I've been so good. Well, nothing ever happened. And it was gut-wrenching. A really huge turning point was not moving on at the groundlings. I think I got to like the 3rd level. And then they didn't pass me. And that was like devastating because that was like my whole trajectory is groundlings to SNL to whatever. And that broke my heart, and it just kind of took the wind out of my sails, and with all the financial stuff, it was a mess. So I'm rock bottom. I think like I totaled my car once, and I had to get another car, and it was this whole thing because I didn't have any money, and my parents had to co-sign. It was like a thing, and just like rock bottom. Like I remember laying in bed and having my alarm go off and just being like, God, get me through this day. God, get me through this. Like just in tears, like please, like I don't want like, please help me get through this day. And like I remember I was working at UCLA at the time, and I would go, like even it was like hot summer, and I would go in my car at lunch and just sleep in my car in the heat, wishing for my life to be different because I was so tired and just so dead inside. It was horrible. It was horrible. And I did that, I think, for, the last couple of years in LA. I think I just was living as a zombie. And it was horrible. And this whole time, I feel God's mad at me. I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel like I've done something wrong because I'm not being blessed. Nothing's paying off. I don't understand. Like, please, God, help me. Like, help. Like, what am I doing? I'm so sorry. Like, what am I? So I hit my rock bottom, and I'm like, I've got to do something. And a friend of mine had run a marathon with Team in Training. And I promise this is all going somewhere, sort of. She'd run a marathon with Team in Training, and so I sign up for a marathon. I'm like, well, at least at the end of this, I'll be super skinny, and then I'll get a boyfriend, and then my life will begin. Like, seriously, like, that's all I've ever wanted. All I ever wanted. Oh, Boomerang, cute dog. Anyway, sorry. So I signed up for this marathon, and it doesn't change my life. I do not lose a lot of weight, because what they don't tell you is after running 20 miles, you can eat an entire pizza and be hungry an hour later. And I was, and I did. So yeah, but it was an incredible experience. I got to go to Alaska, and that was kind of like my first real, like, aside from moving to Los Angeles, like, I really love travel. I love experiencing different things, and like flying over into the mountain. Like, it's just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful places in Alaska. But what the marathon did do is that you have to raise money for Team in Training, and it's for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And through that, some random dude found me and donated $500. And all my friends are broke as shit. Like, maybe $100, like if it's a parent, maybe $200, but for the most part, I had to like scrape, to get that money together. And then some random dude, $500. So I wrote everybody thank you notes, handwritten, and I was just like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, this means so much. And then he wrote me back, and then it became a thing, and he broke up with his girlfriend, and then moved on to me. So for the first time in my life, I had a boyfriend. He was long distance. He was living in Chicago. And so in regards to the marathon, didn't change my life, but this relationship did, for better, for worse. And that's the thing about making choices, is sometimes the next choice isn't the answer, but it's the choice that gets you to something, to get you, So honor those choices. Just make the choices. So after, okay, all right, we're doing it. All right, so I'm 185 years old at this point, and I'm dating this guy, and the overwhelm I feel about being a virgin and about wanting to have sex is so intense. Like, I can feel everybody's disappointment. Like, everybody expects me to just wait until I'm married. And I'm not ready to marry this guy yet. He's not ready to marry me, but we are ready to have sex. And so God, the pressure I felt, not about having sex, but like the pressure I felt of still being a virgin at the age of 185, and the weight of everybody's, like the desire to like people please, to do the right thing, to not disappoint God, was so huge and astronomical. And I remember talking to my friend Millie, and she was like, Mandy, like, are you the same person you were when you were 16? And I was like, no. And she's like, is your faith the same as when you were when you were 16? And I was like, no. And she's like, so why are you living your life with ideals that you had when you were 16? And I was like, I don't know. Like, it was just like a huge light bulb moment of like, I'm not that person that I was. Do I believe I'm going to go to hell for having sex? Do I believe, you know? And it was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it was right or wrong, but I wanted to do it, and I did it. And I'm not telling you this, I swear to God, to overshare, because it's so much fun to talk about. Like, I had to take my dentures out, you know, to make all that happen. But I'm telling you because it was the first time in my life, and hear this, it was the first time in my life where I made a decision for myself that I knew would completely, A, disappoint people in my life in a very big way. 2, B, would stepped so far away from everything that I knew about myself. Because in my mind, you know, I was puritanical, and I was, you know, waiting for the one, and I was living my life as an old version of myself. And so that was a huge changing point in my life. And I was so relieved to have had sex that I cried. Like, just the burden of having that, like it was just, yeah, nobody should fucking have to feel that way ever in their life. Like, it's really, really, really fucked up. So I do the dirty and, you know, I'm talking with God, you know, that week, and I'm just like, hey God, are you there? It's Mandy. And I didn't know if God and I would still be buds, you know. I didn't know how, you know, he was a he at the time, how he would be feeling about things. And God was like, hey, somebody looks happy, you know. God was still there. God wasn't just still there. God was so fucking happy for me. God was like, yeah, empower yourself, girl. Make a fucking choice for yourself. Yes, like, I'm digging it. You are powerful. Yes, oh my God. Like, she did it. Like, and all of heaven rejoiced, and they were excited for me. That is how I felt God showing up. He was not disappointed. He was still there for me, and it wasn't as big a deal as I made it out to be. But a huge lesson that I had to learn. So, what else? And I'm having lots of thoughts about God at this point, because I'm just like, who am I now? What do I believe? Like, nothing, it just, after making such a big choice for yourself in that regard, stepping away from everything that you knew yourself to be, it's like, who am I? And it's exhilarating and kind of terrifying, because all of a sudden you don't have the answers anymore. You don't fit yourself into a box, and it's, yeah, anything can happen. And it was just kind of like, what else have I been missing out on? What else do I really believe? Like, who am I? Like, it was a trajectory. So I break up with that dude really quickly. Oh, I ended up moving to Chicago. By that point, like, it was long distance. I think we were together for like 2 years. And it was just like shit or get off the pot time. In LA, my life had kind of completely fallen apart, and I was just ready to get out. Like, acting wasn't fun anymore. I wasn't enjoying it, and I just needed to leave. So I kind of used him as my ticket. And I moved to Chicago, and we broke up very quickly, and that was very emotional and devastating. I didn't even want to marry the guy. I didn't even necessarily... You know, it was another rejection. Like, he broke up with me. So that self-worth, that needing to win, that like, I'm gonna, show him, and like, it really affected my worth that he was rejecting me, because I was the one who was, anyway, that doesn't matter. But my point is, it was messy, and it was like one of those first, relationships that everybody goes through. Granted, I was like Darlene and Ozark, at that age. But it was my first big breakup that's like messy and like, bleh. So, I mean, thankfully, I had a friend that I worked with in Los Angeles for a little bit when I did medical transcription. She had a room, so I was able to live in her apartment. I was able to rent that bedroom. But it was the first time in my life where all of my friends and family, were gone, and I didn't have a tribe of people to, eat Ben and Jerry's with me and hold my hand and cry. I really had to kind of learn that for myself and do that for myself. What I forgot to mention is that before I moved to Chicago, right when I signed up for the marathon, I also began taking classes with this woman named Candace Silvers in Los Angeles. And she's a human behavioral specialist who kind of teaches human behavior, that our thoughts and our feelings are connected, that the thoughts that we have create our feelings, and that the feelings we have can sometimes create our thoughts, and vice versa. And that, the habit of all of that, like, I was stuck in such a rut of, I'm hopeless, like, I'm unworthy, God save me, and it was like, I had the power to empower myself to get out of that mindset. But I didn't know it until I took those classes that, holy shit, like, I can control my thoughts. Or like, if I'm feeling a certain way, that's not the end all be all. That's not necessarily reality. It's just like a feeling I'm having. And not to say that we don't feel our feelings. It's good to feel our feelings, but it's not necessarily reality. So that kind of like woke me up big time. And all of a sudden I just felt like a lot more empowered. And it took a while, mostly because Candace like speaks in jargon. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen like Abraham Hicks or, that kind of thing. It's just like, what the fuck are you like, can you talk in Britney Spears lyrics? Like, please. So it took a while to like kind of like understand, but eventually I did. And eventually it was just like this light bulb moment of, holy shit, I have power. And so making that choice to move to Chicago, I also moved in with a boy. So that was more disappointment from people in my life who just now thought I was kind of like, I mean, I'm making a lot of assumptions about people. I don't know what they were thinking, but I know, I'm sure my mom probably definitely wanted me to meet the one and get married, the old fashioned way. So, but we break up, I move in with my friend, and I began working my way up into management. I'd only ever worked as like an assistant manager in the food industry back in LA when I was an actor. And at this point I had like worked my way up into, general management. I was managing $1 million bakery and hated it. And just kind of like, even though like my life had kind of fallen apart and we had broken up and I, was having lots of feelings about that. And, it was kind of, it's weird. It's like, sometimes the darkest times in our life can also be the most magical, the most empowering, the most thrilling. I didn't have like any money at the beginning. And I remember just taking myself on dates to like Leonidas. Like, I'd go like walk around. I was living in downtown Chicago at the time. That was fun. And like walking around downtown Chicago, and I would just like window shop, and I would take myself for like one chocolate because that's all the money I had. And I would just like relish it. And I just made the most of like everything. And that was like a personal choice. And I just woke up every morning committed to this idea that everything radically changes today. Everything, like, what's going to happen? Who am I going to meet? Like, where's this job coming from? Like, what's going to happen? And that was hugely different from sleeping in my car in Los Angeles, during lunchtime, in the hot slobber of, summer heat. So I was kind of like beginning to change my narrative, and it was still a mess and, all that stuff. But I also saw the stars align for me. I remember not having any money at all, and I went with my friend Chef, I call him Chef, out to eat at this pub. And I didn't have the money to do that, but I was just like, I'm going to do this because I can't just, when we manifest money, sorry, this is going to be long, I told you, when we manifest money, we can't cling in scarcity mindset. We can't be in poverty consciousness. We have to be, there has to be like give and flow. So now like I'm kind of in the same situation where it's like I was expecting a house refinance to go through, which didn't go through, and my ex-husband was going to buy me out, and it's a whole thing. But kind of in a position of like, I don't know where money's coming from, but I can't not completely spend at all, because money has to flow. There has to be give and take. So knowing this, I go to this pub, I get hired. I just asked like, hey, are you guys hiring somebody? Like, yeah, we just opened, we're hiring. So that was kind of awesome. I began working there. It was super fun. And then I worked my way up into management. I was kind of like backtracking. Work my way up into management. And God has kind of taken on a whole level. I'm still super, super, super spiritual, praying all day long, but it's the God that I'm praying to. It's the God I prayed to when I was 4. It's I'm still praying to the same God, just because it doesn't necessarily have Jesus Christ attached to it or whatever. And I hadn't made that choice yet, but God was just kind of a different version at that point. And where am I going? So after the end of 4 years, I'm working at this bakery, and I'm feeling good. I hate the job, and I'm just kind of ready to like be around my friends again. Like I had a great time in Chicago. Chicago's like a super cool city, very community oriented, tons of alcoholics. They're all like drinking and having a good time, and everybody's out and about. But I was ready to get back to Los Angeles and just be with my friends and family. And I was really excited to go to Los Angeles and have one of these jobs in the food industry, but be able to live in Los Angeles and enjoy it. And I had never done that before because I was a broke ass actor. We always ate at like the shittiest diners. I always will have a soft spot in my heart for like the world's worst diners. But yeah, I was just kind of like ready to see everybody again and to experience LA. Like I didn't even know what was in LA. And I remember watching food shows in Chicago and just being like, oh my gosh, LA like looks amazing. Like, how did I not know? I lived in the like coolest city. And so I really wanted to go back, and I make this big announcement on my best friend's birthday, like, I'm moving back to LA, everybody. And they're excited. And I moved back, and the same friend who let me live in her place in Chicago, her parents had a guest house in Pasadena that I can stay in for a month while I'm getting on my feet. And I'm talking to all these recruiters, and I've got all these jobs, interviews lined up. So I move out, I think with like $1,000 or something. And I'm like, I'm just going to get a job, and it's all going to be great. So I get to Los Angeles, and I'm just like, I don't fucking want to work in the food industry. I don't want to do this. And I'd love to be an actor again at this point, because it'd been so long, 4 years, that, it kind of got like that twinge again. And yeah, I remember going to these interviews and just being like, this just doesn't feel right. I had gotten so used to living my life in a magical way in Chicago, trusting the universe, kind of putting my intentions out there. I created vision boards. I went with my ex's mom on her dead fiance's honeymoon to Hawaii, and Hawaii was on my wall, Brighton Center. Like, I wanted to go to Hawaii, and I manifested that in the craziest way possible. So weird. And if you ever break up with somebody and then go on vacation with their mom, but I did, because it was free. She paid for everything. Anyway, it was an amazing trip. I got to see Hawaii's gorgeous, and it was incredible. So just like learning how to manifest, I was learning how to manifest. I was learning how to like trust the universe. I was learning the energy and like our thoughts. Like we're very, 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 very powerful. And then moving back to Los Angeles, it was like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like I'm in alignment. And so I remember going to this interview, and I can sell an interview. Like, it is very rare that I go to an interview and I don't get the job, because I know who they want, and can be confident, and I'm a hard worker, and all the things. But I just couldn't sell it. I knew exactly what they wanted, and I just didn't want the job. So it was just like, I just acted like and then they were like, well, they turned you down. They said they didn't really think you wanted it. And I was like, I didn't want it. But at least it was their fault. I wasn't making the choice. My money's running out. So I go to this next job interview for, I can't remember what. Oh, it was for this woman in Burbank. Oh, no, Santa Monica. None of this is important. I don't even know why I'm telling you all this. Santa Monica, and I was living in Pasadena, so that's like a 3-hour drive one way in bad traffic. A total nightmare. The place was like 60-hour work weeks, good money, but what life do you have when you're in your car 6 days a week? And as a general manager, you have to be on call. You have to God, I just fucking hate it. So I turned that job down, and I'm like living free in this guest house, and everyone's kind of like, chop chop, like, what's the how's the job hunt going? And so I feel like an asshole, but I also just can't, because it feels like dying. So I turned down that job, and I tell my recruiters it's because I don't want to travel. Okay, like I said, I'd work in Santa Monica, but maybe I could just work in the Valley, because that's closer. And so then they get me this other interview, super cute little place in like right on the little area in Burbank, on Olive. I can't remember. I don't remember the street names anymore. Super cute place. I would love to go there every day and eat and just like journal and have a cup of coffee. But alas, the woman who runs it was so maniacal. It was her baby. She put all of her savings into it. And so she was like all up in everybody's grill all the time. She was completely honest. She was like, I have cameras. She's like, when I go home at night, I watch the tapes. And if a table isn't bust in 5 minutes, I will call you and I will say, bust the fucking table. And I was just like, yeah, I can totally understand that as an entrepreneur, like myself, that's the same way I would be. I know how to sell an interview. I'm hired. I turn it down. Because who wants to fucking work for that shit? There's not enough money in the world. Like, I'm not good with authority. Like, I like my freedom when I'm working. I don't want somebody hovering. Like, let me do my thing and stay the fuck away. So that wasn't gonna fit. Finally, I have an interview, and I tell them this, and I'm like, maybe just like one more, where it's not maybe a 60-hour work week, or maybe it's just like 50 hours, or I was just trying to, I don't even know what. So they give me this last interview, and it's for a James Beard nominated place, like amazing. Like, I would love to go there and eat. But I had to, I didn't even interview. I was just like, I can't do this. And they're like, okay, so what are you looking for? And I was like, do you have anything like a baker? And they're like, do you have any baking experience? And I was like, well, at that time also know that every business I've ever tried, acting didn't work out. I tried to, in Chicago, I tried to get investors for a baking business, and that didn't work out. I've never been able to find investors to invest. And at that point, I've been baking my entire life. I knew that I could make things that were comparable to what were in the bakeries that I was selling. And I really tried for that. I went to business classes. I did all the things. I wrote business plans, and it just never fucking worked out. So, I hadn't professionally worked as a baker, but I'd run bakeries. And that too, it's like, I'd run bakeries. Like, who doesn't want to give money to someone that actually knows how to run a fucking business? Anyway, so they say they do have baking positions, but it's like $17 an hour at most. Like, most baking positions start at like 12 in Los Angeles. And then I was like, okay, thank you. I think I'm just going to pass, and I'm going to figure out my life right now. They're like, okay, bye. And yeah, so I have no money at this point. I'm done. And I'm just like, God, what the fuck is happening? I don't know what's going on. At this time, I'm also, this is a long-winded version. I don't need to tell you all this. At this time, I also had a friend at the time who was like super into crystals, and she was kind of teaching like Candace did. And I remember her talking about crystals. And to me, crystals are just like rocks. Like, I'm very practical in that way. Like, people, when they're like, yeah, this is a crystal for whatever, and I'm just like, it's a fucking rock. And I had actually bought a couple like early in my acting days and just been like, all right, this is supposed to be for clarity. Like, okay, clarity. I think it was lapis lazuli. And crystals are like buying a box of HelloFresh and asking it to make like bake itself or make itself. You have to like work with the energy of the crystal, and like this is all stuff I didn't know. But Thomas, I'm trying to tell a story, a long one. Sorry, bud. But I'd kind of become more interested because I'd become more outside the box of everything. God, this is so long. Oh, this is so long. And I remember her asking me to hold a crystal. She's like, oh, I just got this from this metaphysical store. Like, you like hold this, like it's amazing. And my hand was like pulsing and super hot. And I was just like I'm sure there's like a scientific reason why your hand would pulse. Like, I'm holding it, you know, I don't know. But it was interesting. It was intriguing. It was like, okay, like that is pretty cool, because it doesn't always happen when I hold out, you know, a rock. And that just kind of like got me interested, and I am completely out of money. I have $50 in my bank account, and I am looking for jobs. I don't know what I want to do. I kind of want to be a baker, but I don't have experience in like being in the kitchen. Like, I don't know. But I remember at the guest house, they didn't have internet, so I go to Starbucks. Starbucks, there isn't a place to sit. So I go to the other little local cafe in Pasadena that I know about, and their internet isn't working. And I'm frustrated because I am out of money. Like, I need to figure things out. Hi, bud. Okay. Yeah, I know. You're my boyfriend. Yes. Okay. And so I just get in my car and I start driving around. And I'm like, okay, you guys, like, clearly I'm not supposed to be putting out resumes right now, so what the fuck do you want? And I just got in my car and I just started driving, and I intuited, you know, like whatever felt good, like, you know, I'd turn, I'd be like, no, I shouldn't turn this way, like which way? Okay, this feels kind of good, and then okay, this, I'll go this way, and like this felt kind of good. And eventually, I don't even know how, I ended up in the mountains in friggin' Pasadena. I couldn't get back there. I don't know where I was. But in the mountains, there's this like cute little ice cream shop and like this other little thing. And I'm just like, where am I? I was like, it was like fun to go on this little adventure, but I didn't know where I was, and, you know, gas. And, but the only thing up there was this little farmer's market. And so I pull over and I'm like, okay, like I'll check it out and see if there's some, you know, brilliant message here. And everybody was packing up to go. So the very, very, very end of the place, this guy has these rings, and he hasn't started cleaning up yet, but everybody else is pretty much like gone. And he was like, hello, you know, I'm closing shop. He's like, what would you like? And I was like, oh, I'm just, you know, like looking really quick. And I'm just like popping rings on my finger just to see like what, you know, anything that looks attractive. I'm just like popping them on my finger. And like, maybe this is, you know, maybe this is why I'm here. And like, I know that they're all like crystals, you know, like, look at this pretty ring. And it was just, you know, I don't know. Like, I was so like, what am I doing? Like, what? And I'm like, okay, this one. And I pull it up and I'm like, how much? And he was like, $55. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I see, I can't, like, this, like, what am I doing here? Like, I can't even afford, you know, and I've got $50 in my account. And he's like, for you, $50. And I'm like, I have $45 in my account. Or I said 45. And he's like, sold. And I was like, oh my God. I just bought a $45 ring with the last money that I have. Who does this? Like, who does this? Like, what are you fucking trying to tell me? And it's the prettiest ring, and I love it so much. But I don't, yeah, it was like, it felt like it meant something. And I took it to that friend at the time, and she's like, it's tiger's eye. And I looked up tiger's eye, and tiger's eye is all for self-confidence and for grounding. And that was my first experience with crystals, is that like, crystals come into your life when they're supposed to. And do I think that they're going to help you walk on water and levitate and whatever else? Like, no. But there's something about when they've come into my life, or working with their energy, or like having them on me, that it's like now I it's like setting an intention almost, having crystals. So that was kind of my first journey into crystals. Oh boy. Okay, so we're almost there. So I'm in LA. I don't know. So I have this ring, not this one, but it was this little tiger's eye ring. So pretty. Loved it. And I get back to my house, and I think not a couple days later, and I'm like still like, I'm trying to be as balanced as possible. I'm trying to like still have fun with my friends. Obviously I don't have any money to spend, but I'm just trying to like be even keeled, which is exactly how I'm trying to feel right now, like manifesting my next steps. Be in balance. Ground, just kind of stay positive. And my aunt emails me a couple days later and says, hey, why did you move back to LA when you could have moved to the middle of nowhere to be a baker? And she lives in Washington, in a mountain town of 200. And I was just like, holy fucking shit. Like, just randomly get this email from an aunt that I rarely talk to. And long story short, I email her about the job, and it's just for the summer. It's like $12 an hour, but it's in the middle of nowhere in the mountains in Washington. Mountain town of 200, valley of 3,000. And I'm like, going. And I tell my friends and family, like, I'm just going to go for the summer, and then, I'll come back here. But like, I'm going to take this like last little adventure before I like really hunker down, and then I'll get the serious job. I just needed more adventure first. So I get to Washington, and there were some life choices I made in Chicago that really screwed me up in regard to my self-worth, in regard to that relationship. And so I was going into, it's like, it's weird because on one hand I felt like empowered, but on the other hand, I felt astronomically the most worthless I ever have in my entire life. And I go to Washington, and I'm living with my aunt and uncle, who are amazing. They've climbed Mount McKinley twice. They mountain bike, they hike, they ski, they do all the things. Like, they're those people. Colorado, Washington, Utah, Oregon kind of people. And my twin cousins are there, and they're in college, and they're both on the lacrosse team. They're super fit, in shape. Everybody loves them. Identical twins. And then there's me, this like 5'2" hobbit, 200 pounds, like, hey guys, and I needed that ring. Let me tell you, I didn't understand it at the time, but in hindsight, it was like, oh my gosh, that's what that ring was for. And it was so hard. In some ways, it was amazing. Like, I hiked, and every hike, my aunt would be like, are you gonna die? Because my face would be bright red, and I didn't know if I was or I wasn't. I was always like 100 yards behind everybody else, I swear to God. But I completed every goddamn hike, and they were like 12-mile hikes sometimes. And after a while, like, it became no big deal. But at the time, it was like City Girl goes to, it was like a Hallmark movie, except like a sad, depressing, hard one. And yeah. And at this point, I don't know if like I'm open to God being different. I'm just kind of like open. Like, for me, it's kind of like more about the law of attraction and like our mindset at this point. It's kind of like my faith. But yeah, for various reasons, Mazama was the best of times, the worst of times. It was the most beautiful place I've ever lived in my entire life. The water was just like drinking babies, like baby kittens. The air, unless it was fire season, was just pure, and like, it's just the most gorgeous. It's like the Swiss Alps of America. And I'm having an incredible time, but it's also completely isolating and weird to be living with my aunt and uncle for the summer, as like a 37-year-old. just doing that college thing, the kids are in college, like my cousins are in college, and I'm like, I'm 43 or 38 and washed up. So it was a really interesting time, but like incredible. And around that time, I ended up meeting my ex-husband. I was working at the bakery. Oh, and I got to make like amazing pastries and bread, and people just taught me how to do it. It's like I didn't have to go to school for it. It was amazing. Like I manifested a baking position in the most gorgeous place in America for free, living with my aunt and uncle for a summer, and I was able to save up money to be able to like afford my own place and pay off my car and like all this stuff. And at the end of the summer, I was like, everybody's talking about like the mountains and like the snow and the skiing. And I was like, and so I just tell everybody like, hey, I'm just going to stay through the winter so that I can, enjoy this like winter and so I get like the mountain experience. And I love mountains and snow. Oh my God. I think it stems from Amy Grant's Christmas special from the 1980s. Like I love Amy Grant. I will always love Amy Grant from my Christian days, but the mountains and snow to me are just like gorgeous. So I stay to ski and end up dating my ex at the time, and that becomes serious by the end of that winter. And I randomly buy a house. I knew that I wanted to stay. Yeah, like I knew that I wanted to stay and just kind of experience more. I didn't know if it was my forever place, but I just loved it so much. It was just like a very resourceful place where people chop their own wood and they, live off the land, and everybody has a garden, and it's just very crunchy a little bit, in that way, a little hippie in that way. And I really, really, really enjoyed that. So I ended up buying a house, and this happened. I was making, I think like, well, I don't want to say online, like not a ton of money, it wasn't like less than $20 an hour. Let's say that, so that I don't get anybody in trouble or anything. But, and I went to this broker, and I was like, hey, like, 120 years from now, I would love to own a house. Like, what do I have to do? Like, how much money do I have to have? Like, what do I have to, just to set the intention of one day I want to buy a house. That was all. I did not think in any way, shape, or form I could ever afford a house, ever, because you have to have like $50,000 saved or something. And he was like, well, have you ever bought a house before? And I was like, no. And he's like, so you're a first-time home buyer? And I was like, yeah. And I'm like, well, I would be, but like I'm not ready. And he's like, well, do you have a lot of debt? And I was like, no, not at this point. And because I had worked myself out of that. Oh my God, it took 6 years. 5 or 6 years, 2 jobs to work myself out of $36,000 with a credit card debt, but I did it. Anyway, good girl. It'll happen again, Amanda. So he's like, first-time home buyers like don't have to have anything down. There are programs out there specifically for first-time home buyers, and I was like, what? Like I don't have to have any money to buy a house? Like, what are you talking about? Like. And there are programs out there for first-time home buyers. If I'm educating anybody, okay, you don't have to have money down to buy a house. Certain houses, in like certain areas, like, so look into it if anybody's interested and you have like a good steady job. And I was able to miraculously get a loan for $135,000. Like that was what I could afford with my pay and not having any debt, and my credit was good at the time, and I didn't have to have anything down. And there was this little house in foreclosure that nobody wanted because a crazy lady lived there and said there was mold in it. And I was the only one who did the research on the house, and I called the 2 builders because there was a roof on it, and then she said there was mold, and then she had another roofer come in and put another roof on. And I talked to both of them. They're like, yeah, that bitch was crazy. And it's a good little house. The first roof was fine, and the second roof is fine too. And so I ended up buying this house in foreclosure, and it was just like the craziest, most impossible thing. Like, it still feels impossible. It was such a cute little house. It had like these huge windows everywhere. It was so full of light. So many spiders. Washington has so many spiders. But yeah, it was just so beautiful and so peaceful. And my ex lived across the street, and like street, like gravel road. And so that was huge. And in this house, I'm working at the bakery. I'm up at like 4 a.m, making pastries. And I also get this job as a writer. I get to write this column, this weekly column. And what else did I do? Oh, and I also bought my camera. I had saved exactly $1,500 in my bank account. And there was this post online. There was like a bulletin board online, and saying like someone was selling their father had passed away. They're selling their camera, $1,500, all these lenses, all like the whole 9 yards that you would need, startup kit. And I was supposed to be getting married at the time. My friends at that point, I think it'd been like 2 years, and they're like, you're never coming back. This is your Hallmark movie. You're marrying your mountain man. And I'm like, I know we're getting married and I should probably save this money, but I follow my intuition and I really want to buy this camera. And so I totally bought the camera. My friend ended up taking me to India. Like, just like all this shit, like I had manifested this beautiful, magical little life. I had a house. I had a creative job. I was working as a baker, which I'd always wanted. And I had this side gig making a little bit of money, writing this weekly column. I got to be like the Sarah Jessica Parker or whatever her name was, of the mountain world, and trading my, Manolo Blahniks for flannel and boots. But every week I got to be like, Mazama, like, what happened? It was just super fun. I loved my life. I loved it. At the same time, the best of times, the worst of times, it was incredibly lonely. When you see the same 13 people over and over again, and I'm incredibly driven and ambitious, it can be a fishbowl. Everybody kind of talks about everybody, in small towns that small. And so in that regard, it was also really, really hard for a lot of reasons. But it is during that time, oh my God, we're like an hour in. Jesus. If anybody's still with me, God bless you all. God bless you. Because I did not tell the story well. Okay. At that time, I don't even know how, but I stumbled onto Psychic Teachers podcast. And when I was in LA, I bought a pack of tarot cards. I forgot to say that. When I was back for that month, when I was supposed to live in LA, I did buy a pack of tarot cards. And I was like, maybe I'm going to kind of learn how to, it wasn't with any intention of reading for other people. I was just intrigued, opening up to my psychicness, because other people around me, talked about it and were doing it, and opening up to your intuition and all of this stuff. And so I was curious, and my faith in God was bigger. It was outside the box at this point. So it's I didn't feel like God was disappointed. I just felt like it was another part of my journey. I'm a truth seeker. I want to know what is truthful to me. But tarot scared me. Those cards, when you're indoctrinated into something, you are always wearing those glasses first and foremost. Whether it's religion or culture or a way of life or, mindsets or, you can't, whenever you receive information, even now, if I receive the news, it's I'm immediately judged through conservative Christian eyes. And then it's oh, I don't believe that. What do I believe for me? So it's really very fascinating. Where was I going with that? Oh, shit. Indoctrination. Yeah, so my faith in God, just kind of railing against a little bit, just learning to be open, learning to not be so closed down. This is wrong. This is evil. So yeah, I really began to question. And it's around that time that I somehow stumbled on the Psychic Teachers podcast. And I fell in love with these ladies. Oh my God, I love them so much. Deb and Samantha. Deb is pagan. She's Wiccan. And then Samantha is Catholic. And they are two ladies that have worked as professors at universities who now teach spirituality and teach everything from they have a podcast called Psychic Teachers, and it's everything from chakras to clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance, all the clairs, how to open up your intuition, what being empathic means, just anything you can imagine, and like some creepy shows of like, you know, demons or entities, you know, like it just, which, but just, I really, it was great to learn about my intuition from people that I felt like I trusted. Like, I feel like they're normal, practical, like down to earth people. They're not like, hey guys, I'm like starseed channeling, like blah, 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 blah. You know, they're very normal. And so I learned so much through those ladies, and I can't recommend that podcast enough, or Enlightened Empaths. That's Samantha's second podcast. So during that time in Mazama, I was just like learning, like going through this spiritual awakening. And I was working Monday through Friday, but on weekends, like I would, you know, make sure to meditate. Saturdays and Sundays, I'd go to the bakery and eat something delicious, and I'd come home and meditate. And, you know, I'd learn about crystals. So I started kind of like buying crystals. And it was just, in some ways, it was just like the most beautiful time of like peace and tranquility and balance. Like, I just created such balance in my life. And when we create balance in our life, like, we can manifest anything. Yeah. So I don't really get into tarot at this point, but I'm pretty much like, really, my intuition is taking off, and I'm just kind of like open and excited to be open. I get married in Mazama, and I get pregnant in Mazama. And Mazama is great. I think the nearest hospital, though, is like an hour away, and it's not like the world's greatest hospital. Mazama's like 3.5 hours from Seattle, 3.5 hours, 3 hours from Spokane. It's like right smack dab in the middle of the state. And there isn't like a lot around. So, and at that point, I was just kind of like, I don't know that I want to be here anymore. I I miss it so much. It's just, oh God, it's like one of those places that will always haunt you. It's like going to Europe on vacation or something, like, but it was just really lonely and isolating to be that far removed from everybody. Like, I'm too social in that regard. So I'm pregnant, and we decide to move back to California to be closer to friends and family in LA. And we end up in kind of like the Lake Arrowhead, Big Bear, like up in the mountains, Twin Peaks. We lived in Twin Peaks, which says everything about my experience there. Yeah, we moved during my third trimester. Didn't have jobs. We had a place to live for a month. We were going to live with my friends, Marie and Chris, who were the fucking bomb. Yeah, pregnant. And it was crazy. And we spent so much time in the car during my third trimester. Like, driving down there, and then driving from Panorama City to Twin Peaks, like every day, back and forth, trying to find, you know, a place to live and jobs and all that stuff. So I didn't move a lot. And so when we finally find this place, Liam was working, my ex was working at a ski shop, and the guy ran it. He had an extra house, and, you know, stars aligned. This place was like a 1980s bed and breakfast that hadn't been touched in 20 years, 30 years, 35 years, 40 years. I don't know. But everything was covered in bear, fish, like from the wallpaper to like the sconces to the carpet was bright green. Everything was just like fish and bear and hunting and like full-size bear. It was like such a trip, like a place you'd want to stay just to tell your friends you stayed there, except we lived there. And it was so dark. It was so dark and dreary, and everything was just dark. And I never saw my friends, because in LA, people can't be bothered to drive across the valley, let alone drive 2 hours. I mean, I had friends come visit, but it just wasn't enough. And after those 4 years in Mazama, which were very lonely and isolating, it was just even more of the same. And at that point, like, my marriage really started falling apart, and I'm not going to get too much into that, but I have Ruby, so I cook her till 42 weeks, and then it has to be a C-section, and I think just not moving my entire third trimester, you know. 42 weeks, And after that, I developed postpartum hypertension. I had preeclampsia in the hospital. And that whole thing was just a fucking goddamn nightmare. I definitely have PTSD from it, and it's still, well, I've done a lot of healing there. I need to give yourself more credit, you know. But I'm still on medication for high blood pressure. It's hormonal, but after a certain point, they just lump you in with everybody with high blood pressure, which is really annoying. And yeah, it was incredibly scary. And when you go through that after birth, you know, it's not like an invalid fear, an unnecessary fear. It's a real fear that you can have a stroke, that you can have a heart attack, that when your blood pressure is that high. And you know, I had countless scary stories, and just feeling incredibly alone. But I remember having Ruby and just being like so scared for my life, and like, you know, if I go up the stairs, you know, when she wakes up and I have high blood pressure, like, am I going to stroke out and die? And she's just going to be up there screaming, you know, who's going to find me? Like, what? And just really scary. But during that time, really, like, I was so scared and just had no clarity, and like, what is next in my life? Like, we're trapped in this place. Like, what is this? Like, I'm not seeing my friends. This place feels like a fucking hole. And that's when I picked up my tarot cards, and really, like, I wanted readings, and I'd had readings before from other people, but I wanted to learn it, and I wanted guidance. Like, I was so desperate for guidance. And so I started pulling cards for myself every day, and learning the cards, and I hated them, you know, for what they said. And looking back, they were like, walk away, get out of this situation. This is not good for you. Like, but at the time, I just felt like I was being beaten up, and like, I didn't understand. I'm like, I have a newborn child. I have postpartum. Like, I'm like, where am I supposed to go? You know, like, this isn't, I can't just like, where am I going to go? And, but I could have gone somewhere. I could have, but I didn't think that I could have gone to live with my mom, or, you know, something, or divorce felt impossible to me. It felt 100% impossible at that time, because I wasn't making my own money. I had a baby, you know, but that's when I started getting into tarot. And after 2.5 years, like, we're both kind of miserable, and it just doesn't feel right. We're not seeing, you know, our friends in LA, family in LA enough to make it worth it. And so we're like, okay, so like, where do we want to go next? And we had talked about Utah and Vermont and Maine, and, you know, places with snow, because we both love snow. And but nothing felt right. And so finally I was like, oh, like, is there anywhere else that you'd want to go? And he's like, well, the only other place I can think of is, you know, in the Asheville area. You know, I went through there on my motorbike, you know, 20 years ago, and I really like the area. And I was like, Asheville, that sounds familiar. And Asheville's like on the list of like all the best places to live, and like all of those. So I'd heard of it before, and so I looked it up, and it was like, this has like craft beer, and it has, you know, tons of amazing food, and it has hiking and mountain trails and systems, and it just had like checked all the boxes. Like, huge artist community, a huge woo-woo new age community, and so it checked all my boxes, and I was like, we're out of here. And he was cool with it too, because we just weren't feeling California. And I had hopes of, you know, being able to see my friends more. And I didn't mention I was doing photography for the local newspaper. That was the other thing. I was working as a baker and writing the column, and then all the photos I got to submit as well. So photography also started for me in that regard there. And then in LA, I was kind of like, oh, maybe I could do headshots, maybe, but when you're living that far away, it's impossible. So we decide to cross country, head to Asheville, and we buy a fixer-upper, because that's all we can afford. And I'm just watching my daughter. You know, it's been 2 years, and then it became 4 years. It was 2 years, we move, and COVID hits. and I'm just trapped in this house. I'm just a stay-at-home mom, and I absolutely hate my life, and I love my kid, but if you don't have any support, if you don't have any way to keep your flame alive, I don't care what anybody says, you're going to be a terrible mother. You're going to die inside. And I did. And I feel like I was screaming to everybody in my life, I need fucking help. And nobody listened. I felt like I was communicating that. I don't think I really was communicating that. Because on the outside, I was still creating, and I was making pies, and I was doing stuff, and, I'm the positive one, and, I think people, and I project, strength, and, all this stuff. And maybe I doth protest too much in that department, where I project too much that I'm okay, and then it's like, how come nobody's here when I'm falling apart? And it's like, well, does anybody really know you're falling apart? And I was fucking falling apart, and but I was at the same time really getting into tarot, more and more crystals, and COVID hit, and something hit for everybody with COVID, whether it was real, death and loss, or just the things in our life are just heightened, and it's like we just kind of all woke up in a certain way. And for me, that was this marriage isn't, I can't, life is too short. And so I asked for a divorce. We got divorced. And I started collecting tarot decks like Alicia Silverstone collects clothes. I loved oracle decks because they felt less evil. And it was just amazing. The more that I opened up and allowed myself to open up, it was like I started having dreams, and dreams that came true, and just highly sensitive. When I'm, and I said, also started reading for friends and family sometimes, but I would just do email readings, and I'd look up the meanings, and then I started reading more intuitively, where I'd put the cards out, and then I'd be like, okay, what is the feeling I'm getting? That's kind of how I do everything, my journey. How do I feel right now? And I just, kept getting better and better. And then, I didn't have anything else. I don't want to say I didn't have anything else to live for. I had a daughter, but I don't care. I'm not a person that is I'm not here to live for my kids. I'm not here to just be a mother. I'm super passionate, super ambitious, and I have purpose. And my purpose for me is not just about having kids. Some people want to just be mothers, and I don't want to say just, some people just love being mothers. That is super fulfilling purpose to them. And I wish I felt that way so often. I just wish I could just be like that stay-at-home mom. But that does not resonate for me. I love my kid. I want to spend time with my kid, but I don't feel like living for my kid is the answer. For me living a passionate, ambitious, driven, exciting, heartful life, traveling, adventure is what being a good mother is, because I'm teaching her the example of that. It's not my goal to live for my kid. It's my goal to live for me, so that my girl will live for her, and she will love her life, and that makes me want to cry. Which isn't necessarily how motherhood is taught to us. We're told to, just give, and be a doormat. And, one day you get to go to Tuscany or something after they're all gone, and you've got empty nest syndrome. And then it's just not for me. But so I'm doing tarot readings. I'm learning more and more and more. And I start this YouTube channel. And I have to tell you, at one point along the way, I wrote a blog about walking away from Christianity. And that I felt was kind of the nail in the coffin. Because it just didn't resonate for me. I couldn't fit myself in that box anymore. And that was kind of my way of saying hey, friends and family, This is who I am. I'm putting myself out there and saying this because I don't want to hide it. I don't want to pretend who I am. I want to be exactly who I am. I want to live my life. I don't want that weight and that burden and the eyes on me anymore. I just want to be like free, you know? But that's a one thing. Getting into tarot and psychicness and evil devil shit, you know, supposedly, is a whole other, like, you are dragging and screaming, you know, dragging people to hell. You are a bad example. You are completely disconnected from God. And having been a Christian, I know how people feel about me. Like, they don't have to say it. It's like, I know how I would feel if somebody had done that back in the day. So I feel the weight and that judgment on my shoulders all the time. Because again, when we're indoctrinated into something, I feel the pressure, I feel the energy of it. Which is why I like have to rail against it and just be like, I don't care. Like, whoosh, like cleanse myself and like let it go, because this is my life and I love what I do. I love what I do. I love being able to help people. And I still pray to the same God I prayed to when I was 4. You know, that hasn't changed. It's really funny. Like when I got into all of this, my mom was like, you know, it just must not have taken. Like, you just must not have ever, you know, I thought that you were. And I was like, of course I was a Christian. I was so fucking sincere that I didn't fuck anything until I was 185. Like, who does that unless they're that freaking sincere? So, like, I still remember all the scriptures. I have friends that, you know, still like, I'm still praying for you. I'm still praying for you to come back to Jesus. And it's like, you don't think I know everything that you want to say to me? Like, that's what I would have said to you if you walked away. You know, like, it doesn't leave. All those verses, I still remember. It's just, it's like going to LA and going to the gay club. It's like, it's a new experience. Just most people do not allow themselves to live outside of the box of who they've been indoctrinated into. And I swear to you, if I can help anybody at 1 hour and 17 fucking minutes, the end of a movie, for crying out loud, it's to give you permission to live your life on your terms. Because nobody else is going to do it for you. Nobody in your life is going to tell you to be different than who they want you to be. Or to be different than, I mean, they like who you are. You've always been this person. They're in your life for a reason. You've always been, you know, the golden child, or the, you know, the one who always did what I said, or, you know, the empath, and I get to be the narcissist, and I get to like wield you into like the way I want, you know. I don't know how it shows up for you in your life, but man, once you start making decisions for yourself and honoring and empowering yourself, and there is such an immense amount of freedom and purpose. Like, the purpose that I feel doing this is amazing. And not necessarily like the YouTube channel. I mean, it's a bunch of general readings, and, you know, I use Taylor Swift cards and lyrics and stuff, and I love it. It's like fun, you know. But when I do these expos, so I was like doing all these readings, have all these cards, and then I noticed that there's this Spiritual Fusions Expo where you can sign up to be a tarot reader or a healer, and you can make money and like actually read for live people. And I was like, my gosh, like, am I ready for this? I don't even know how I think I just kind of did it. And I just signed up, and they, you know, you had to give them your website and everything, and they let me do it. And I was like, okay, like they must have seen my readings. They must have thought I was good enough. It must have resonated for them. And in general readings, you never fucking know. It's like, there's like a million ways to read the cards, and I just pick my path, and if it resonates, great, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But reading live for somebody, like, I remember like going to my first expo, like I just felt nauseous, like so sick to my stomach, and I was just like, God, just use me, because I don't, like, I'm so terrified. Like, am I a fraud? Like, is this like real? Like, am I supposed to be doing it? Like, I felt like almost like maybe I'm overstepping my bounds. Like, maybe what if this isn't my purpose? What if I'm like trying too hard? What if I want to be this, you know, tarot reader? And it, you know, just like all of these thoughts. And you know, you should be doing this for 20 years before you read for other people, and like you're too new at it, and all of this bullshit. And I go in, and the very first person that I read for, it's just like boom, 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 and they're like, "Thank you, that really resonated." And I was like, "Holy shit, I can do this! Like this is real. Like it's not just me. Like the cards I pull for me are always spot on, and I'm like, holy shit!" But to read for other people and to have them be like, "Thank you," like that really resonated. It was like, I got to help somebody. And then it was just like, who else can I help? Like, this is so great. And it was just like so exciting and just amazing. And the more I do it, the easier it becomes. The more I do it, the more insight I get, the more brave I become. And I know that eventually I'm not going to even need cards, which is impossible to me to think right now. But I feel like eventually, like as I keep opening up, it will be different. But the expos have been incredible, you know, and it's like some of the stories of people, you know, you're saying things and you're kind of reading the cards, and then they're like, and I'm like, you know, is this resonating for you? And they're like, yeah, like this happened when I was like, just, you know, sexual abuse and trauma. Like you're just saying that, you're just reading the energy, and then they tell you the story, and it's like, oh my God, I had no idea that was the story, you know, like just the impact, the level of humility I feel. It's just astounding. So those have been incredibly validating, which has given me a lot of courage and confidence with this channel to just kind of like do what I do, and like, hey guys, like whatever, you know. And then finally, I took a mediumship class with Samantha Fay from the Psychic Teachers podcast. She teaches a mediumship class with her friend Denise. And that I just signed up for. Like in my readings, I just keep being told like I'm way psychic and I just need to keep opening up, and you know, but when it came to mediumship, like I've never seen spirits. I mean, I was raised born again, so I don't know if I just shut stuff out. I've always been fascinated with ghosts. Like in 5th grade, we had like a ghost club, and we used to read like all the stories of all the ghosts and all the books. Like, but I don't ever remember seeing spirits. I remember being terrified of the Scooby-Doo spirits. Like I loved Scooby-Doo. I would always watch it, but I was terrified of it. And at night, like I would see the ghosts, you know, the little glowing football player or whatever. I don't know how real that is. Like, I don't know, but I remember being like going to sleep all the time, terrified, like covering my face and just being scared. And it's interesting because Ruby's the same way. And she often like comes out and like has to sleep with me because she is nervous about stuff as well. So I don't know if I just like blocked it out. I don't know if I had experiences, I just don't remember. But I'm just kind of like, it doesn't matter. So I take this mediumship class. I'm not expecting anything because I don't see dead people. You know, like what does that mean? Like, how does that all work? And for some people, they like see a whole image of somebody, and for other people, it's like in their mind's eye, like they can see stuff. But I take this class and I get a few hits on stuff. This one girl I read for, you know, for me, somehow, like I see the person sitting, and I'm not even a good visualizer. Like when I do meditations, like my mind doesn't work that way, probably because it's so fucking cluttered all the time. Virgo, ascendant. And, you know, I just saw this young guy pop out, and, you know, he was just like really funny and had a lot of energy. And so I'm like telling her, I'm like, did you have a brother that passed? And I'm like, he's like about 18, like really kind of like fun and kind of goofy. And she's like, oh, she's like, my mom, like basically her mom didn't have a child, and this was the age of that child. And she's like, he comes up in every reading. She's like, I always want to talk to my grandmother, but like he wants to come up, like I don't know who this guy is. Like I just like, he's not like, I don't even know him. Like he just always is there. Like I want to talk to my grandmother. And so I was just like, holy shit. Like where did that come from? Like, okay. And then somebody else, she was a little bit older, so like I imagine like a mother, like a grandmother type would come through or something, but it was like a young, kind of like guy in his 40s, and it was her brother, and I was like, like, did your brother die of like a disease? I'm seeing like a guy in like his 40s, like young, like too young to die, 2 daughters, like just, I don't fucking know. And she's like, oh my gosh, that was my brother, and I was just like, what is happening? And it wasn't every time. Like I had some abysmal failures. Like more often than not, I failed. But when I got it, I got it. And so I know that there's that there too. And it's really interesting because when I read now at these expos, I have a couple of cards that are like a mother's love or a father's love, or, past loved one is thinking of you. Or like when those cards come out, I immediately get emotional and I can just cry. And I'm like, oh my, like, I'm like, there's a cross-knit, like it's usually when the person is really regretful, when that parent is like, I'm so sorry. Like I had got to, like, she has to know. So I know that there's some mediumship abilities there too. it's not something I've fully developed yet. And I was going to be working with, Ryan Michaels of A&E TV's Psychic Kids. But unfortunately, because of my money situation at the time, I'm not going to be able to do that. But, everything, I feel like what's in alignment with my next whatever will come into my life, and what's not meant for me is going to fall away. So I'm just trusting that as divine timing and whatever. But yeah, I really would love to develop more and more and more. So, oh my gosh, this hour and a half. Anyway, you guys, I don't know. I don't know if that was helpful, but if I can tell you anything, it's one, to make decisions for yourself, to trust your heart, like your intuition, like like that gut feeling of like, who am I? Like question everything. That's all that I'm doing right now is like, who am I right now? Like I've been through divorce, been through COVID, been through like a shit ton of stuff in my life. Who am I right now? Like, I just bought a guitar. Like, am I a woman who plays guitar? And am I a woman that gets a tattoo? I almost had to cancel that. Am I a woman that, whatever? I don't know who I am until like I zip line through the jungles of Africa. I don't know if I'm that girl, So rail against everything you've been taught to believe about yourself, because even the best of intentions from family and friends or from society or from our culture is always going to tell you to, live your life in a specific way. People don't want us to change because they're used to who we are. And then when we do change, it's like, a lot of people want to keep us the same person. It's like, sorry, I'm not that person anymore. There's boundaries now, and there's, whatever. So 1, question everything. 2, rail against anything. Like have the courage, have the confidence, have the power to say no to people in your life, to say no to not even people, but to like the pressure of it all. It's like my mom is on my shoulder all the time. She's a very powerful woman. Like I love my mom, but I also can feel her fear for me, very, very potent. And, all those college friends that I'm sure, like, she's doing tarot now, like, for all I know, they're probably not even thinking about me, but I don't know, like, maybe they're having prayer circles, like, I don't know, but that's not my journey. They get to be afraid for me. I get to live my life and help people at these expos, and that to me is purpose. That to me, it's so funny. What I care the most about is what God thinks of me and my spiritual life. It doesn't matter to me what other people think. And my version of God is different than other people's version, and that's okay. I am respectful of what people want to believe, for sure. But my experience with religion wasn't good. Like I had a lot of great times. Like I, had great friends and stuff, but at the end of the day, it doesn't resonate for me anymore, and that's okay, even if it's not okay for other people. Like, you have to stay true to your change and who you are. And now I'm just rambling. So, you guys, please, if you have any questions, like, I don't want anybody to feel alone as they go on their journey. Like, spiritual journeys can be very, 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 very lonely. So if you feel alone, if you have questions, like, I'm more than happy in the comments, or reach out through Instagram if you don't want to ask it in public. Like, I have my email address down below as well. I just want people to not feel alone, and I want people to have the permission to open up, to, you know, start listening to a podcast, start, you know, maybe buy yourself an oracle deck to start, to have the courage to be you, and to know that you're powerful, and to know that you're special and unique and deeply feeling, and that all of that is valid and honorable. So yeah. All right. Oh my God. Okay, so this was really long. Anybody who watch this whole thing, I'll bake you brownies. Like, send me your address and I'll bake you brownies. And if you're just like some random dude, like, don't. I'm so over Instagram and like all the guys that are like, hey, hi, how are you? And it's like, fuck off. So if you just want to like chat or whatever, like, no. But I'm here for real people. I'm here for real people that are going through something. And I can't answer everything, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, all right, that's it. I love y'all. Thanks for listening, and hopefully this helps who it needs to help, even if it's just one person. Okay? Bye, everybody. Bye.